Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron Krickenberger, also known as Aaron of Sig Beard, also known as Aaron, the member of the Kubernetes Steering Committee, also known as Aaron, the co-founder of Sig Testing, also known as Aaron, the guy who won't shut up about GitHub labels on the Kubernetes dev mailing list. And I am this week's host for the Kubernetes community meeting. Today is Thursday, August 16th. This meeting is being publicly recorded and will be posted to YouTube, so please be mindful that what you say here is on the permanent record and will be so forever and ever till a black hole opens up and swallows us into the void. On today's agenda, we have a demo coming up on the Kubernetes ingress controller for Kong, and then we're going to have the usual release updates and a couple of SIG updates today from SIG Docs, IBM Cloud, and Autoscaling. So with that, I will hand it over to Harry for the demo.
Hello, everyone. This is Harry. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I hope you guys can see my screen. So I do cloud infrastructure and software at Kong. As you all might be aware, Kong is a very widely adopted open source API gateway out there. We are built on top of Nginx. So we inherit Nginx performance and the design decisions. We basically extend Nginx for more flexible routing and dynamic configuration, and also have a plugin configuration. So you can execute custom logic in your request processing at the ingress layer or at the API gateway layer, and execute common code that is common to all your microservices inside Kong. So I'll just jump directly into the demo, start deploying, and then explain the architecture of how we have designed our ingress. So I'll go ahead and execute our deployment, which creates a bunch of custom resources and RBAC related RBAC roles and service account, and also creates a database which is used by Kong. So here's how we do our deployment. We have Kong in data plane mode and control plane mode. The data plane nodes proxy all the traffic for your services, and the control plane Kong configures those data plane nodes via a database. The ingress controller we have designed, it talks to the API servers and translates the Kubernetes objects that are created, ingress and other objects that other custom resources, and translates those and provides them to the Kong control plane, which writes them to the database, and which are picked up by the data plane nodes. All things related to Kong are deployed in a specific Kong node, Kong namespace, which can proxy traffic for all your namespaces. Also, as you can see here, we proxy traffic directly to pods. We bypass kubeproxy, which helps us in having features like sticky sessions and load balancing policies in Kong. So that's the basic ingress model we have, and we listen for ingress resources. Since ingress resource is fairly limited and narrow, we also have a custom resource called Kong ingress. I'll just go ahead and show the Kong ingress here, where we have three things. We have proxy, route, and upstream. So with proxy, you can specify if you want to further proxy the HTTP or HTTPS traffic to a particular path. You can specify connection details. Routing wise, also you can specify priority of regex if you want to accept traffic only for HTTPS and not HTTP. If you want to accept traffic based on request methods and things. And if you also have option to customize health checks, which are active and passive. So that's the gist. I'll go ahead and check if our pods are up. Okay, so it's still being initialized, which just usually takes a couple of minutes since it provisions a Postgres database and our ingress controller. So I'll go ahead and deploy a dummy application meanwhile, which is basically just a echo server. and then try to get the URL of the server. This is exposed as node port. So while that's being done, the ingress resource we create, we also have something called plugins. So plugins in Kong basically allow you to execute a bunch of custom code. So here's an example of a plugin resource that I have, which basically is a rate limit configuration where you can limit traffic upstream to your proxy. And here we are saying that we want to limit traffic to only 3 requests per minute and 100 requests per hour, and will limit by the client's IP address. So we can create these custom objects in Kubernetes object store, and then apply those to our ingress resources via annotations, and Kong will take care of the rest. So you don't need to know the internals of Kong. You just need to know what open source plugins we have. We have over 60 plugins which are open source. So our service is up and running. So I'll send a request directly to the service. So as you can see, it's a simple echo service echoing back the request itself. I'll go ahead and check if we have our node, our pods running. All right, it seems like our pod is up and running. I'm now go ahead and create a plain ingress object. So as you can see, we are proxying for host foo.bar, and all. So since it has root path, everything goes upstream. So I'll go ahead and create our ingress rule. Now I'm going to source a file, which basically is just going to set some environment variables related to our proxy IP and proxy port. So as you can see, we have Kong proxy, which is the data plane Kong. We'll get its IP and port, so that we can send a request to our Kong or our Nginx enhanced instance and send requests as a host header foo.bar, and Kong should proxy that request upstream. Looks like something is off here. So I'll go ahead and the demo gods are not with me today. So let's see. All right, so Kong is up and running. So let's see. I think I did not source the source the file. I cat the file. All right, so as we can see here, we got the request upstream, and it was proxied by Kong, and we can tell that via our via header, and Kong injects some latency traffic here. So to get into a little bit inside of Kong, what internally Kong is doing, this is the admin API of Kong, and I'll get the targets. Targets are basically which IP addresses or which pods in this case are proxying the requests. So here we can see we have one pod which is proxying the request. Now I'm going to scale the deployment up to 3 pods. And what the ingress control will take care of is it will listen for this Kubernetes events, and if we now check it would usually have a latency, but if we now check, we can see that all the 3 pods are in Kong, and all the requests would be dynamically routed to the 3 pods. We currently do hash based or cookie based routing. We can do client based routing, so we can configure that. If I now send a okay, so if I now send the request, this was handled by pod IP 0.8, and let's do it again. It's still handled by 0.8. So we have a static consistent hashing. So sometimes it will not round robin. It will have a full state machine inside, and will route the traffic accordingly. So this is how a plain simple ingress works. We support multiple services. We support TLS upstream and TLS terminations and certificates. Next, I'm going to go ahead and quickly show how a plugin would work. So Kong plugin is a custom resource. Think of it more like a config map rather than a resource. So here we go ahead and create our plugin resource, and then I'll go ahead and patch our ingress object to tell our Kong ingress that apply the rate limiting plugin and use this configuration. So the ingress is patched, and this rate limit plugin should basically limit requests to 3 requests. It should not allow you to send more than three requests in a minute, and should inject the headers that are necessary to convey that. So this is a request here, and as you can see, Kong has injected 4 headers which tell you the limit and the number of requests remaining. As you can see, we can make 2 more requests, so we'll make 1 more, and this should technically really be our last request. And as we can see, the rate limit is exceeded. So this is how you can configure authorization. You can transform requests at Kong. You can do authentication. You can do OAuth, OIDC, and the plugin data SDK is open source. And yeah, that's all I had to demo today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Harry. There's one question in the chat about how are WebSockets handled in Kong Ingress.
So you can configure, like Kong can forward WebSocket traffic directly. So we just proxy it directly. So you can upgrade a WebSocket connection, but we do not actively change any traffic on WebSockets.
Cool. Excellent. If people want to find out more, is emailing you the best way to find more?
Yes. Email would be the best option to reach me. And I also hang out in the Kubernetes Slack channel. So
awesome. Thanks a bunch.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Moving on, I believe I saw Tim Pepper around here. So we're going to move into the Release 112 update from our esteemed Release 112 team lead. Take it away, Tim.
There's not too much to say today. I mean, we're in the middle of our active development, but we're slowly getting our way towards code freeze. It's only 2.5 weeks away already, which is amazing how the time flies by. We're 40 days to release target. A couple happenings this week. We've created the release 1.12 branch, and we're doing regular fast forwards now, pulling in master into the branch for the time being, for the kind of the next 2.5 weeks, and then obviously more targeted as code freeze happens. Branch CI is on track to arrive this week for that release 112 branch. And our CI signal is mostly okay. Release master blocking, release master upgrade have a few issues that are being worked, and partly hoping to see some improvement there with the release branch and CI changes. So hopefully some slight improvements there this week. And that's pretty much it.
All right. Any questions for Tim? Moving right along. The patch release are any of the patch release managers here? Mehdi, Masiek, or Enarud? Okay. So in the meeting notes, you can see the latest patch releases that were cut, and when they were cut, I believe we'll have some upcoming patch releases in the next week or two. Moving on, let's see, oh, that's me, graph of the week. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can actually keep myself to a few minutes here. So, gonna share my screen. All right, so let's talk about flaky and failing tests. I don't know about y'all, but my day-to-day kind of involves sweeping through about 50 to 60 issues and pull requests a day at a minimum. So I kind of personally, as a human being, kind of notice when things feel a little bit off in terms of the flow of the commits into Kubernetes. The quickest signal, aside from being a human being, is to go take a look at this test grid dashboard called Presubmit's Kubernetes blocking. We also have a non-blocking presubmits dashboard. Those are tests that don't necessarily prevent PRs from merging. But this dashboard shows everything that does prevent PRs from merging. And actually right now it's doing a great job of demoing how test grid isn't always perfect. I can actually safely ignore this red looking thing because there's no test failure in here named overall, meaning the entire job is failing. So if I click on this, what I get to see are test runs for every single pull request for this particular job. for basically, I think it's the past 2 days worth of history. And so if you're kind of feeling like the same job is failing over and over across a variety of PRs, you can come to this dashboard to see if that's true or not. And this is TestGrid's sort of weird quirk. It kind of considers a test failing unless it actually sees a pass for it within some window, and we haven't quite gone past that window here. But so aside from that red thing, everything kind of looks good. I can also see these like percentage of runs are failing over the past week, but that's a number. What if I wanted some more graphical way of seeing how things were failing over the week? So I've showed this dashboard a couple times before. This is Velodrome. It's basically just a Grafana instance that pulls some stuff out of an InfluxDB instance. We have a bunch of panels here. The panel I really want to focus on today is called the Presubmit failure rate graph. So if I click on this and do view to expand it up here, some of you may have been feeling like COPS was failing a bunch recently. It's the blue line here that I'm hovering over, and it was failing pretty continuously. But something that's been pretty insidious and creeping up over time is this purple line, which corresponds to the integration tests that run on your pull requests. And you can see that's been kind of going up over time. I want to give a big shout out to Janet Kuo for actually putting it in the PRs to fix this. And you can see the flakiness is going back down. I know this looks super noisy, but it does kind of help us identify which job might be the culprit when the TestGrid summary dashboard doesn't do a great job. So who's actually responsible for fixing these things, or do we actually know if these things are happening? So your friendly CI signal person kind of helps with this, but you all can help with this too. If you notice that a test is failing, you can file a bug. Here we're looking at all of the bugs that have the label kind flake. So these are tests that are failing or passing kind of inconsistently. You can see we have 10 of these open right now. I also have a query here for tests that are continually failing. That's the kind failing test thing. You can see a lot of people like to also tag these as bugs or critical urgent or a bunch of random things. We're still kind of working on our label hygiene, but kind failing test, failing all the time. And finally, who actually is responsible for fixing these things? So you can kind of take a look at who actually owns the test case in question. Oftentimes in TestGrid or in the test name itself, you'll see this little tag of Sig Foo. So you should probably go ask Sig Foo, hey, what's going on with your test? If it seems like it's a broader problem, you should probably also go take a look at who owns the job. And I don't really have as great of an answer for this. We're moving to a system where all jobs are defined in directories that correspond to the SIG that owns the job. I've dropped the directory in the meeting notes there. But generally, like, if the job has network in the name, it's probably SIG network. If the job has node in the name, it's probably SIG node. If it has AWS in the name, you should probably go check with SIG AWS. And then finally, if it seems like it's a problem with the test infrastructure, we're pretty active and responsive in the test infra channel in Kubernetes Slack. But I will warn you, if you skip step 1 and 2 and come directly to us, we're going to send you to the back of the line. Please go check with the SIGs who know more about the test logic and test cases in question before you immediately think that there's something wrong with the test infrastructure. I think that's all I have. Any questions? Hooray! Hopefully that's helpful. You'll probably be seeing more of these as we get to release burn down. It definitely makes CI Signal's job easier when they know who to ask to fix certain tests that are blocking the release. Moving on, we now have Chris presenting the KEP of the week. Chris, are you around?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks.
Hi there. I'll be presenting this KEP on behalf of Nishi Davidson. My name is Chris Hodge from SIG OpenStack. Nishi is from SIG AWS, and we both have been participating in the new SIG cloud provider, which is a SIG that is meant to kind of coordinate all of the efforts across all of the cloud providers, and and help focus on common goals and outcomes. And one of the first goals that we're working towards with SIG Cloud Provider is captured in this KEP, which is to transfer the responsibility of maintaining valid documentation for cloud provider code to the cloud provider. And there are two primary goals that are coming out of this. The first is to produce a common document that describes how to configure any in-tree cloud provider that can be reused by tools such as kubadmin to create minimum viable Kubernetes clusters. And this is to address a problem that Sig Docs had brought to us about how the documentation across all the cloud providers was inconsistent and incomplete, and they didn't feel like it was a positive representation on for the Kubernetes documentation team. And so Sig Cloud Provider is looking at building a set of documents that will consistently describe how any in-tree cloud provider can be used. Now, as many of you are aware, we are looking to remove all of the cloud providers from upstream. And so even though that's happening, this is an important goal because we want to provide a consistent experience for users and developers. Now, in addition to this, we are also, all of the cloud providers are being moved out into external cloud providers that are being maintained by sub-working groups within Sig Cloud Provider. And so we're also looking at, as a second goal, to produce a set of documentation which accomplishes the same thing for the out-of-tree providers. Now, this adds a little bit of complications because there's two levels of this. The first is, how do you activate an external cloud provider? This is actually more complicated than the in-tree provider because with in-tree, all of the code comes with Kubernetes, it's available, where with out-of-tree, there are more steps involved in being able to pull in an external provider and load it and do it in a consistent way with external tooling such as kubadmin that makes that successful and positive. And so Sig Cloud Provider is going to attempt to produce documentation and improve the documentation for how you load the external providers, and then also also set standards for minimal documentation for all of the external cloud providers. So at a high level, that's what this KEP is meant to accomplish, and I'm happy to take any questions. And Nishi, if I missed anything, please let me know.
So quick question on kubadmin and coordination with that. Are you working with Sig Cluster Lifecycle about sort of how kubadmin can support this to make this an easier flow?
Yeah, we've had a few meetings with the cluster lifecycle team, and and that's something that is definitely on our radar. And when there are opportunities to collaborate, we've asked them to kind of work with the Sig Cloud Provider to work with them on that. And so those communications haven't been particularly strong in the last few weeks, but we've definitely had conversations with them, and we're kind of aware of the efforts that are being shared by both of these SIGs.
Chris, if I may add, a lot of this work on the KEP was done primarily because Joe Beda and Tim Sinclair from Sig Cluster Lifecycle were pushing for it. So I do want to give them the credit to push us to actually create this KEP. And Joe, yes, we're working towards improving all the documentation.
Well, no, I mean, and this is great work, and thanks for doing this. And in terms of, I think, it starts with documentation, then we can take a look at it and say, how can we simplify that by, improving kubadmin and building code so that, the best documentation is the stuff that is so obvious you don't need it, but we're clearly not there.
Agreed.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris and Nishi. I'm hugely supportive of the cloud provider SIG's efforts to sort of simplify some of our SIG sprawl that we have going on and trying to figure out the appropriate use of commonality across cloud provider implementations. And docs are hard. They're the funnest part of it all. Hey, speaking about that, we have SIG updates, and our next SIG to give an update is SIG docs.
Nice segue.
Thanks.
How short am I trying to keep this to, like 5 minutes or something?
Oh, sorry, you can go 5 to 10 minutes. Totally your call.
Okay, because one of the things I wanted to go over was the Kubernetes.io search outage postmortem. So, but let me share my screen here.
I'll start doing jazz hands if you run over.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what's going on? So yeah, 1.12 I guess is underway, and Zach Arnold is the docs lead. Misty Hacks refactored the contributor guide, which is great. This is for like the docs contributors to help guide people that want to contribute to the doc set. Let's see, one of the PRs that are kind of under consideration right now is adding alternative search engines for the folks in China. So that might be Bing or Baidu or something like that. So we're trying to figure out like what that should look like. Let's see, and then we need sort of a working group that's focused on the generated docs. For example, there's like a kubelet documentation issue where we're not getting all the information from the that's embedded in the source code, and like either we need to request, I think, the SPF folks to add like a flag to turn off third-party flags, or or to create a script that will generate the build Kubernetes and generate the docs, and then just scrape it from the CLI help thing, which seems not like the best way to do it. So we want to come up with better ways to do these generated docs. And then I put in a proposal for fundamental modeling concepts, which is to rigorously define like different parts of Kubernetes, even like sort of at a math sort of level, and then to build a mental model we can all agree on, and then generate like some diagrams and stuff to help users really understand what's going on in the system. Because one of the feedback from the UX studies that we did recently were that there weren't enough diagrams, and the ones that we had weren't that helpful. So we want to try to address that. And then that currently was initially, I think, tentatively accepted, but they're working out sort of the contract with the contractor. Let's see. And then we are doing, so starting this weekend is Write the Docs in Cincinnati. So Sig Docs will be doing like a PR bash and a doc sprint there. And that will be on Monday. And then the main thing, which I wanted to go over today, was the search outage. So probably most of you know, like last week or so, you would notice a lot of the search results were dropping off for Kubernetes.io. So when you did a search for Kubernetes stuff, you wouldn't see any results that were links to Kubernetes.io. And so we did a postmortem for that. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but we finished it. The long and short of it is that when we started offering the version docs, we had to make sure that those weren't indexed in the search results and pollute the search results. So we would add the xrobots tag no index to the header for those. But then through a series of like separate PRs, like that mechanism got stepped on, and it accidentally, the no index header ended up in the production master in the build for the production site. So that's what caused it to drop off. So we did this postmortem, which explains like what the history is, what the mechanism is, and then we have takeaways for how to fix that. So primarily what we're going to do is first like make sure we hand off all the infrastructure and tooling to CNCF, and Luke Perkins will then own that, and I will help him document like all those mechanisms, and they will be in the documentation repo. So if people need to see that, that way the knowledge is not compartmentalized in particular individuals. And then the other things that we're planning to do are add some like testing and monitoring, just so that first we can make sure when the production site is built that these things don't happen, but then also we should monitor like the indexing, the Google indexing. So if something happens, it may not even be this sort of thing specifically, but if it goes up or down, like we'll be notified. And then the other thing was doing it as a better fail-safe default state, because the problem was like since master was the only branch that didn't need to have the no index on it, that was set as sort of an exception. But then when all when this got stepped on, then the default state was nothing got indexed, and that's probably a more terrible state than if everything was indexed. So we're gonna, redo it so that the default state is better if it fails. And I will be taking this postmortem and putting it back into the GitHub issue so that it's more visible, and then people can read that. And I will put a link to that in the notes after that's done. And I think that's it. Did anyone have any questions?
All right. Awesome. You did that in just under 6 minutes. That was amazing. And thank you so much for that postmortems. Postmortems are awesome. That one looked especially great and informative. And thank you for connecting all the dots back. Okay, next up we have Sadev from Sig IBM Cloud.
Yep. All right, so I have a slide deck link in the agenda. I'm gonna share my screen here. So screen, it's okay? Everyone can see it?
Yep.
Yep, thanks. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Sadev Zala. I'm a co-lead for the Sig IBM Cloud. And in line with what Aaron introduced himself, I'm also known as a member of Aaron's fan club to some people in country backs. Alrighty, so back to the SIG. So the SIG is relatively a new SIG. We have created it at the end of April 2018 this year. So I will just provide a quick overview. The purpose of SIG is to integrate Kubernetes with IBM public and private clouds. We have IBM Cloud Kubernetes Service, IKS, and IBM Cloud Private, ICP, on the private side. They both participate in the CNCF in conformance program, and they both are certified Kubernetes. The SIG meets every other week, every other Wednesday. So it just coincidentally, we had a bi-weekly meeting yesterday, and about 7 to 10 regular attendees on the SIG. And the meetings, all the meetings are recorded, and it's available on YouTube, Kubernetes channel. About the SIG leads, we have 3 SIG leads, Richard from IKS team, we have Khalid from ICP, and myself more from the open source side. You can read more about the SIG on the README page here. I have provided the link, and if you are interested, please do join the SIG mailing list to keep up with what's happening in the SIG. So there's a link there too. Before I move to the next slide, as I mentioned, this is the first time we are providing updates to the community meeting as a new SIG. So I want to take this as an opportunity to thank you, some of the awesome people, everyone in the community who helped with the processes as we are creating this SIG, specifically Paris, George, and Ihor. A lot of help, whether it was it was from the YouTube YouTube settings or Zoom accounts or GitHub or anything. I mean, those guys were always available to help. So thank you so much. Moving to the next slide. So what are the discussions we are having so far in the SIG and the SIG meetings? The first, I would like to mention that we had a couple of chats with Andrew Kim. He's a SIG lead for the SIG cloud provider. And we will be working on moving as a sub-project on a related note. We don't have a public repo yet on the IBM cloud provider codes. Something it's a work in progress. Another SIG lead, Richard, he's working on it, and he's actually presenting the next slide. So if you have any question on that. The second thing I'd like to mention is the Sig Charter. It's a work in progress. We actually had a draft ready, and we had it discussed in yesterday's meeting. We have a couple, 3 comments. So something I'll be addressing today and creating a PR later today or tomorrow. Also, we've been having discussions going on about cleaning up some of the GitHub accounts related to the SIG. So we are pretty good there. We have cleaned up the miscellaneous accounts we had there. One of the things I want to mention here is, with the every SIG meetings, first 10, 15, 20 minutes, we have SMEs from IKS and ICP talking about some of the new features as they are made available in both of those platforms. And anything related to Kubernetes that is beneficial to the SIG for discussions. Oops, sorry. So some of the topics I want to mention here, we had overviews and demos on both IKS and ICP, and they are, as I mentioned earlier, they're recorded and available on YouTube. So if you're interested, please take a look. Some of the other interesting topics we had, including Kubernetes update support strategy in IBM Cloud Container Service. We had like 15, 20 minutes of talk, great talk from Richard. But in general, it basically supports 3 concurrent releases at any time. Right now, it's 4 actually. Just day before yesterday, there was an announcement made for 1.11.2 support in IKS. So it's still doing 1.8 to all the way to 1.11. Cluster multi-availability zone support was added just some time back, and we had a good talk discussions on that. On the IBM Cloud private side, again, overviews and demos. And then we had a couple of different talks with the updates on the IBM Cloud Private 2.1.03, which was released in May. And on the scalability side, I have actually a link provided here. It's a blog post with the findings on our scalability testing and lessons we learned there. So ICP is right now certified for 1,000 nodes, and it's a work in progress. It's incremental work. We will have more data, more sort of documentation available sometime soon with the bigger scaling side, 2,000 or so plus nodes. For the future meetings, we have a number of topics out there. It's on the SIG agenda page. So, and that includes support, topic around support for hybrid clouds, deploying workloads between IKS and ICP, or migration, that kind of things. Reviews related around performance, etc. So if you're interested, please do attend the meetings. We would love to have you in the meetings and discussions. And for the next slide on some of the collaboration we have going on for some time. Moving to the next slide, and I would like to have Richard for this slide. So Richard, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Take it.
Sure, sounds good. Hi, everyone. So this is just some of the community collaboration of members of the SIG IBM Cloud team that have done over the course of the last year or so. So some of this collaboration has been done before we officially formed the SIG, but in the areas of network policy and scalability and storage are some of the items we've been trying to work with upstream on the community side, and trying to develop our lessons learned from the scalability in our public cloud on cluster creation and monitoring and performance there. So just a high level, just a few links there if you're interested. And the next big item, at least on my plate, is to try to sort out what we should do with our cloud provider that we use to support the IBM Cloud Kubernetes service. Right now, we developed it in the Kubernetes 1.5 timeframe, and that was when those cloud providers were in tree, and now we're trying to sort out what to do with what we have internally here, and we'll be attending those SIG cloud provider meetings and determining the next steps there. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And that's it, Aaron. Back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. That was a fantastic update. We're happy to have you as members of the community. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Sally, but before I do, he's been taking amazing notes. Does somebody want to swap out for him while he gives the Sig Autoscaling update? Tim, thank you. All right, Sally, all you.
Hey, all right, so I'll kind of cover things by the different topics. So for those of you who don't know, Sig Autoscaling is in charge of basically anything involved with automated scaling of things in Kubernetes, whether they're pods or the cluster itself or components of the cluster. So in this release, we kind of had two big areas we were working on. So for the horizontal pod autoscaler, we're working on removing scale limits in favor of kind of more sophisticated behavior for determining when it's appropriate to scale. This was a commonly requested feature, scale limits and scale backup, because our previous kind of one-size-fits-all hard-coded constant approach didn't fit all use cases. We've also been kind of brainstorming future improvements to the underlying algorithm itself, considering looking at more data points than just one, and what changes we might be able to make the algorithm more flexible to certain use cases that we weren't considering before, especially around certain categories of custom metrics that don't behave identically to, say, CPU. And finally, we are planning on landing a second beta of HPA version 2 this release. So that will allow you to specify kind of further labels for your custom metrics to scope them down. So like if you have a custom metric for, say, requests per second, and you specifically want to scale on get requests per second, previously you would have had to create some sort of special logic in your custom metrics provider. But now you'll be able to add an additional label in the HPA. You'll be able to add an additional label that says, method : get, and that will translate into the query that ends up being made to your custom metric storage mechanism. That also has improvements around object metrics, specifying target average values, and we kind of went through the API itself and did a little bit of cleanup around kind of where we special case certain things and made things more uniform. So the other component that we had some work going on this release is the cluster autoscaler. So they've kind of been focusing on some large known issues around scaling GPUs and scaling with local persistent volumes. So hoping to clean up some of those issues and bugs. And we've also started initial steps on investigating how we could integrate the cluster autoscaler with the cluster API so that we can make use of the cluster API for actually scaling the cluster instead of requiring custom logic in the cluster autoscaler for particular clouds. Any questions? Looks like no questions for me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sully. All right. That leaves us with 15 minutes to go through this week's announcements. So I just scraped through the shoutouts channel and I may butcher pronunciation, so I super apologize in advance, but we're going to give a shout out to Diju for being such an active reviewer and reviewing lots of incoming PR so quickly. A shout out to Arnaud Newcomb and Jeremy Rickard for being awesome bug triage shadows and handling the job wonderfully while it's Guinevere was out last week, the 112 bug triage person. Misty Hacks, shout out to Ian Y. Choi, who has become a Kate's org member in order to work on the Korean localization and is already providing great feedback as evidenced by a link you can see in the meeting notes. And then We loves us our Slack emojis. Thank you so much to Jay Singer Dumars for creating the test grid emoji, and then also the test grid real talk emoji, which is of course all red. Next up, I wanted to hand off to our steering committee elections officers. Paris, Ihor, George, who wants to take this one? Or I can just give the announcement myself.
Yeah, that's fine too. The announcement is that the steering committee elections are coming. Next week, everyone will be receiving an email that's going to explain eligibility, candidacy, etc. So look out for that on the Kubernetes dev mailing list. We will be obviously advertising on many other channels. However, the main communication channel will be that dev list, and then a voter's guide will ultimately be your single source of truth that's checked into GitHub. But all details, again, will be laid out next week in the email.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's see, I was in the middle of trying to drop this into the meeting release notes. I think there's a link in there. So you probably saw an email from Christoph Blecker to Kubernetes dev. Contributor experience members have also seen this. We're basically proposing that the path to Kubernetes membership, it used to involve emailing a Google group address and then just kind of waiting for a while until somebody would approve the PR. We're going to be moving to an issue-based system where you file an issue against the Kubernetes/org repo. It's already going to be filled out with the template of what you're supposed to do. And we think this is going to greatly improve the latency for adding members to the org. Right now, the GitHub administration team is going to service these issues as human beings, and we are in the process of setting up automation to help facilitate this in the future. So once we kind of get that ironed out, you may even see us move from file an issue to file a pull request. And once the appropriate people have approved it, it'll merge and magic happens. Similarly, on an automation note, I just want to give folks here a heads up to brace yourselves that automation is coming. Some of you have probably noticed I've been going around to all of the different SIGs or repositories to try and make sure that basically we as a project start to kind of do the same things across the entirety of the project to help us with maintenance, auditability, consistency, reliability, what have you. The things I care about right now are kind of coming at you from a steering committee perspective, but they also coincidentally will help our automation down the line. The first of those is making sure that every single repo we own and every single org we own lives inside of the sigs.yaml file. This is my effort to tell you people to enumerate your subprojects. What is the code that your SIG owns? I really want to give a shout out to SIG Cloud Provider and the other related SIGs that have to do with clouds like SIG OpenStack and SIG VMware and SIG IBM Cloud for kind of sorting out where the cloud provider repos should fall within different SIG subprojects. That was hugely helpful. You know, ultimately the ownership of code should fall to a single SIG. Right now, I don't care which SIG that is. I just want to make sure I know who I can go talk to if I want to do something with that code. And people getting their repos added to SIG's YAML is helping. Mentioned this last week, and thank you, Nishi, for getting the AWS subprojects baked in there as well. Similarly, once I know what the repos are, I want to find out who the people are. And we do this by having owners files at the root of every single repository. Mostly, I think the place I need to chase down right now are the Kubernetes client repos, which belong to SIG API machinery. And there are a couple stragglers around as well. Once repositories have owners files, we can start to use the merge automation that we use on, I don't know, 50 to 60 something of our repos right now, where you can use /lgtm and /approve, and then something will automatically merge the pull request if those two labels exist. None of the do not merge labels exist, and all tests pass. This is Tide. Tide is coming. Tide is used for every single repository that has merge automation, except for Kubernetes, which still uses the submit queue. and we are in the process of seeing if we can swap out the submit queue for Tide prior to code freeze. We're actively working with the, SIG testing is actively working with SIG release to figure out if we can make that happen. Similarly, a lot of the automation requires that the same labels exist everywhere. So for example, the automation that automatically labels pull requests based on the number of lines changed applies a size /s or L or XL label. Right now, it just kind of creates those if they don't exist. So there are a bunch of repos, like all of the Kubernetes CSI repos have a bunch of gray, bland, boring labels there. I plan on turning on label syncing so that the label descriptions are set through the GitHub API. The labels are colored the same way you see them colored in every other repo. And basically, this means that if you work on the Kubernetes project, the same things are going to basically work the same way in every repo, not just the main ones. I hope this is okay with everybody. I've tried to make a push for this in the past and got some pushback. I kind of expect to run into some pushback again, and that's okay. I really want to figure out how we can iterate and move things forward. So your help and patience is greatly appreciated. Any questions? Okay, cool. I see the contributor experience people are really happy about a consistent developer experience, which is great. I just want to make sure I'm like not talking into an echo chamber. So they're really appreciative of it, but I want to make sure I'm actually getting in touch with the people who are heads down and making things happen, and that I'm actually improving their daily lives, not impeding them. So anyway, thanks. Sully, you just added something. I will hand it off to you.
I just wanted to give a reminder to people, since we're coming up towards the end of 1.12 vaguely, that we are still in the process of deprecating Heapster, and in 1.13 Heapster will be officially considered fully deprecated. Right now we are in bug fix only mode, so if you have not yet switched over to metrics server or in an external metrics pipeline, this is a reminder that you may want to get on that.
Excellent. Anything else from anybody? Okay, two things I forgot. Number one, I was supposed to mention that my employer is Google up top, but I think y'all probably know that. Number two, I was supposed to tell you all to mute when other people are speaking, but coincidentally, you all did that already. So big hand to everybody. This is the quietest, non-noisiest meeting I've ever attended. Thank you all so much. But definitely, I want to thank my muting minions for helping out on that. Super appreciative. And with that, I will give you 7 minutes of your lives back. Thanks so much.
Thank you.